Are you concerned because your child's in recovery, but their behavior doesn't match what you would expect at this point in their change? This is a question that was sent in from Jenny, and the term that was used was the dry drunk syndrome. And this happens for to many parents where their child's in recovery and their child's really grouchy or angry or resentful, and it's kind of a surprise. I think often we think our child's going to be in recovery and they're going to be happy and everything's going to be just back to normal, and it just doesn't work that way. So, hi, I'm Cathy Tombaugh, and I want to apologize about the Facebook Live. I tried to do it live, but that didn't work, so I'm just going to record this and put it in. So technology happens at times. So let's talk about dry drunk syndrome. I don't hear that term as much as I used to hear it. But again, if you're not clear, it's when your child's in recovery, or it could be further in recovery, but they're not happy, they're not in a good mood. There might be a lot of anger, that kind of thing. And so it's hard for family members to deal with someone like that. So the first thing I would say is to not label your child or your loved one if it's somebody else. But I'm assuming it's a child. So if your child is exhibiting this kind of behavior, labeling them is not helpful. It just, no one needs to be put in a box, and it's just another negative thing for them to have to deal with. So instead of labeling them, you could just say, I feel sad, or I'm concerned that you're so angry right now, or something along those lines about how you're feeling about your behavior. Again, using your I messages is something that could be helpful. So things to think about when you're looking at your child and wondering what's going on with them. Some things that just came up when I was kind of researching this too is that feeling of superiority. So in AA, often, there's the idea of surrendering. And if that works for you, that's great. But if not, I still think that people feel a certain degree of humility if they've gone through recovery, if they're really understanding what's happened with them, and they're feeling, compassion for themselves and for other people, and they understand the challenge that they've gone through. There's a bit of humility in there. So if that's not present, that might be something to think about. They have a low tolerance for things that are going on around them. They could be judgmental. There could be a lot of resentment, frustration that they can't drink or use. They see other people are drinking and using and they can't, and they're angry about that. They might be angry at you for making them go to treatment, still angry at you for all the things that they think you did, that kind of thing. Their anxiety might be, showing through as well. So, with recovery, just to note, you often feel worse before you feel better. And this is very common. And honestly, if you're not feeling, I would say, worse, or not, not your best self, you're probably not doing the work that you need to be doing. So recovery is hard work. I mean, this is not easy. And there are certainly ambivalence about leaving a lifestyle that there's parts of it that they probably liked, which is hard for a parent to think about, but it's true. I mean, some kids have said they really miss the hustle of getting the drugs, and the whole process that they went through to get the drugs is something that they miss. And even though they know it wasn't good for them, they do miss some of the aspects of that. And remember, they have to give up a lot of their friends. They have to give up so much when they go into recovery. So it's not always so easy. So what I think something that you can do is to acknowledge and reward the behavior that you want to see. So if your child is acting well, if they're in a good mood, if they're helping you around the house or different things like that, notice that and acknowledge that. I would also acknowledge on a regular basis how proud of them you are, how proud you are of them for having them get through their sobriety. This should be something that you are reminded of, something that you remind them of often. And rewards are something that's helpful. If they are doing well, a gift card or something, a nice dinner, an activity that they like to do, a class that maybe they wanted to take. All of these are helpful in moving them forward, and that will help their mood. Again, when they aren't acting well, or you seeing this behavior that you don't like, the best thing is to just ignore it, and no rewards for that behavior. Obviously, if you were giving rewards for something, you're going to pull back. So I think the idea of giving them the cold shoulder is a way to do it. You're not going to get angry. Don't get angry. Don't get mad. Just, remove yourself from the situation and try again when they're in a better mood. So the other thing that's helpful too is therapy. There's a lot of psychological behaviors behind why they chose to use drugs and alcohol. And if they have not addressed that in therapy, this would be a time to do that. So I would really encourage your child to go. If you cannot get them to go by themselves, I would go with them. I mean, this is addiction affects everyone. There's family dynamics that are involved in all of this, and it's helpful for all of us, including family members, to have our own recovery as well. So I hope some of these tips help. Jenny, let me know if you have more questions about that. The next question was from Yolanda to how to convince someone to get help. And that's a complicated one too. It's not easy. I know there's a lot of parents that are always asking that question. You want to get your kid to go to treatment and, they don't want to go. So the craft tools were really put together to help resistant people, have family members help resistant people go to treatment. That was really the beginning of the reasons why Dr. Bob Myers created the craft tools. So these are things to keep in mind. I would definitely check out the communications, the tools. Again, positive reinforcement is helpful on what they're doing well. Having short, concise conversations with them. If you go on and on and on, or keep repeating the same information over and over and over again, the yelling, the nagging, all of those things are just not helpful. So I would take time to think about what you want to say to your child. I would write it down. Keep it short, a few sentences. The information sandwich is one where you ask them, can we have a talk? Or can I ask you a question? Something along those lines. Briefly state what your point is, and then follow up with a statement of, does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying? That kind of thing. So those are good tips to know. And again, make sure you have allowing for natural consequences and clear boundaries. Don't be stepping in and fixing everything for your child. That's not helpful. There's no reason to get help and go to treatment if there's no downside to their substance use. So know that you can continue the conversation. If they say no, it doesn't mean that's the end of the conversation. You can bring it up again. I would not bring up any conversations about getting help if your child's high or drunk. Not going to be helpful. You need to find a time when you're in a good mood and feeling somewhat balanced and that they're sober. So that's when you want to have those conversations. And again, know that if it does feel like, it's getting difficult, you can take a break and step away. You don't have to always be on it. And don't, use your good judgment on not overdoing these conversations, but pacing them out in a way that makes sense for you and your child. The other thing that I would add to as well is that it's good to have 2 or 3 options. So I think our kids do not want to just be funneled into one program. Giving them a few options is helpful. If you can do a little research and find out a couple choices, then they'll have more buy-in to the program and you're going to have a better chance of a healthy outcome. Okay, and then Yvonne mentioned friends and family who are, suggesting that they let go of their child or that they turn their back on their child, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's a tough one. And the thing that's really hard is most friends and family have not done any research. They don't really know about addiction, but they have lots of advice. And so it can get difficult. One thing that you could remind them is that research shows that stepping in rather than letting go is a proven strategy. So, the craft approach is one that's very helpful. They've had the program go through numerous studies, and the research shows it's like 70% of the people in the craft approach were able to move their child towards recovery, as opposed to, I believe it's about 30 for intervention and something like 12 to 13 for Al-Anon. And, so I can go into all that, but I mean, Al-Anon is not in support of Al-Anon. I do think Al-Anon can be a good program for people. Their intention is not getting your child in recovery, but I think a lot of people go to Al-Anon thinking that this is going to help my kid go to recovery. So it's good to know that that doesn't really work that way. Interventions can be helpful, but what does happen is that sometimes people feel coerced, or they feel resentful because their parents sent them, it was like this pressure to go, and they don't always finish the program. So that's something that's come up. So, there has to be willingness on both sides. So again, what you want to do, Yvonne, as well, is make sure that you do have clear boundaries for your child and you are allowing for natural consequences. It does not help to fix everything for them. So if that's an issue that family and friends are seeing, I think that's something that you do want to look at. And again, you want to support your child's continued recovery, not their continued use. So it is good to work with your kids. I mean, we know that putting them out, usually they do worse, on their own and in their streets. And then you have no way to talk to them. And also then all that resentment and anger comes up because, they do feel deserted. I've heard parents say their kids feel like they've been deserted. So that's not really helpful. Addiction is a difficult situation. It does, the behaviors are not fun to be around. So, it's just important to do what you feel is best for your child. You're the one that knows your child best, not your friends or your family. And then finally, Claudia asked, is it cruel to tell your 18-year-old he can't live with you unless he passes a drug test? So, yeah, that's an issue that comes up often as well. What do you do? So again, as I mentioned before, I think something to keep in mind is often when our kids are out on their own, especially at a young age, 18 is a young age, they can often do worse before they feel better. So, and you're not going to be there to help them. You're not going to be able to have conversations with them. There's no guidance anymore. You're pretty much out of the picture. And so you really don't know what's going to happen with this 18-year-old. So you have to, but there's a lot of things to take into consideration. So what are your goals? What do you really want? And I think that would be something to write down. What is it that you really want? If you could, what I say to a lot of my clients is if you could push the easy button and life was just the way you wanted it, what would that look like? So maybe, where are you headed here and sort of figure that out. And do you think you can work with your child if they're living at home? If you have not tried the communication skills from Craft, I definitely would say before you let your child go, I would dig into those. I would read about them. I would reach out for help if you want to see how those skills can be used for your personal situation. Those are things that I think are really helpful. And if you haven't used those yet, I definitely would say do that before you do anything else. It's important to also understand why your child is using. What is it that's motivating him to use? If there's a family dynamic that's going on that needs work, look at that. I mean, we all do need to look at recovery as a family unit. It's not just about your child. It's about everybody. But if you do keep him home, it's a great way to keep the lines of communication open. The other thing, though, you have to weigh in, do you have siblings at home that are being affected by this? And how's that going? So there's a lot of different things to think about. But it sounds to me from your question that you probably do feel it's cruel. I'm guessing, and I could be wrong, but you feel it is cruel to put your 18-year-old out. And honestly, I think there's a lot of other options I would try first. It depends upon what you've tried, how much work you've done with him. Definitely I would try to get him to counseling or therapy. And like I said in the other question, if he doesn't want to go by himself, maybe you could go with him as a group, like we're going to family counseling. And sometimes with the counseling as well, you don't have to always say it's because of your drug or alcohol issues. If your child has other mental health issues, anxiety, depression, ADD, bipolar, other things, you can use those as a starting point to get your child into recovery, and then they can start to work on their addiction. So hopefully some of these tips are helpful. If you have other questions or need advice, or if I can be of any help to you, do reach out. I do offer a free coaching session. There's no obligation to do anything more. I'm happy to help you with these in more depth if that's something that would be useful to you. And also there are other resources. I have them in the file section of our group where you can find more help at the Partnership for Drug-Free Kids, the Center for Motivation Change, or my go-to websites. So thank you for listening, and I will try this next week with a live, and we will continue with the technical issues. Hopefully I'll get those fixed. So take care and have a good rest of your week. Bye.